Hello and welcome to another episode of Steven's Four Walls. I recently did a post out on my socials and also my YouTube community page asking for questions for Q&A, and I got one question that was really good. I thought I could extend this into a video, and someone to know cars that I've previously owned. Not all of them have been on the YouTube channel, and I thought this would be a really good sort of topic to talk about and make a separate video on. Actually, looking at cars I've owned previously, we'll go for those in a minute. But also looking at maybe cars I want to own in the future and what my sort of goals are for in terms of achieving dream cars. We'll all come on to that just in a moment, anyway. So let's begin. Let's look at the cars that I previously owned. So we'll start with the very first car I bought. I actually passed my driving test when I was 17, so I sort of got all that over and done with. Even though I didn't need to actually own my own car at the time, it wasn't until after uni, I think I was about 22, I actually bought my own first car. And that actually wasn't a Bath. Now, I absolutely loved that car. In fact, I think I had 2.5 years to the day, actually. And I really liked the car, really enjoyed it when I had it. But after about 2 years, I started to think maybe it was time for a change. And the one good thing about the Bath, maybe not so much nowadays, but back then it was a bit of an unknown brand, which meant that although I couldn't get insured on things like Fiesta Z-Tech S's even, or anything slightly warm, the Baths I could actually get insured on at quite a reasonable price as well. But so they were a bit sort of under the radar. People didn't know about them as much as they do sort of nowadays. So it was a 500C, so 140 horsepower, with the convertible roof, two-tone grey. Very fond memories of that car. But after a couple of years, I mentioned I sort of looked around, changing around. And to be honest, I wish I'd never. I'm glad that the Bath went, and I'm glad I sold it. But the next car I had wasn't the best. But before we go on to that, though, I did actually have another car as a daily while I had the Abarth. I did think about keeping the Abarth just for weekends. I ended up buying a nearly new KA, little 4KA 64 plates, a sort of second generation KA. And that was really good. It was a daily little drive. I didn't need a great big car at the time. I just wanted something very cheap, very affordable, cheap to run, and all and that fitted the bill. I had that for about 2 years, I think, and then I changed jobs and I didn't need a car for everyday driving because my new job was just around the corner from where I live. So I decided to sell that and obviously save myself the money of running the car as well, and also get the value of the car back as well. So I sold the Abarth and I bought a 2015 Vauxhall Corsa VXR. Now, this was a bit of I thought it was a little bit of a step up from the Abarth, and I actually really liked the way the car drove. But I had that car for less than a year, mainly because it was an absolute nightmare, that car was. I don't know if it was a Friday afternoon car or if Vauxhall aren't particularly that good, but I just had a constant array of issues with that car, and just seemed that every other week I was taking it back down to the Vauxhall dealership for various repairs. Two issues that I constantly had the tyre pressure warning light coming on, which for some reason you couldn't actually take off. You had to take to dealer for them to reset it, and then a week later it'd be back on again. And I'd go around, check the tyre pressure, and they'd be fine. It was just obviously a faulty sensor or something. I don't know. They didn't really want to do anything about it. I also had an issue with the steering. You bring the steering wheel back round the centre and it squeaked. Now, obviously, I didn't know what that was. It had a new steering rack replaced in the warranty. So after 9 months, I ended up selling that car. I didn't want to take it out of warranty, and I ended up buying the SLK. Now, the SLK I had up until this year, so that's featured on the channel. Absolutely loved that car. However, after 6 years, I just started to feel it was time to go. I had a few issues with it. And that was a car that I would have liked to have kept if it wasn't causing me issues. I've got the older SLK and I've also got the SL as well. Now, I expect those cars to give me issues because they're a little bit older, but the new SLK, it just started giving me some issues, and I didn't really want that car to give me issues. However, it was my first Mercedes that I bought. I was so pleased to buy that car, and I have so many fond memories of that car. So I owned it for 6 years, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. And over that sort of year, it was sort of question mark whether it should go. Eventually, I sort of sold it, and it went up to a dealer in Scotland. And I hope someone else uses it a bit more than I was using it. Obviously, I have the SLK and had the SL, and I just wasn't using the car. That's ultimately came down to. It's nice to go out occasionally for a nice road trip or driving it, but it just wasn't being used. And the fact that that car is also depreciating while it sat there as well, not really being used, was also a big issue. Obviously, after that car, well, I still had that car at the time. I bought the B Class, which is the car I'm in now, which is fantastic. One of my probably best, most sensible purchases that I've done. Possibly my most unsensible purchase, the SL. We'll come on to that in a bit. And I've really enjoyed having this car. I've had it just over 3 years now, and it does everything I want to throw at it. In fact, it's not down to the tip, but it can do it. If I want to take the dogs out in it, it can do it. Long motorway slug, it will do it and give me good economy as well. It doesn't cost me that much to work in terms of tax and insurance on top of that. So I'm really glad that I actually bought this car, and it's just something I just find it's such a useful tool to have. I often just got a bit of a boring box on wheels, but sometimes you actually sort of need that. So on top of having this car and also the new SLK, I then purchased a £500 SLK from the dealership I worked at the time, and that's still with me now. I still own that car. It was about 2 years ago I bought that car, and I absolutely don't regret it. It has been a bit of a headache in the first sort of 6 months trying to get all the issues sorted and all of that, but this year it's been a fantastic car to use. I've used it quite a bit, and next year I actually want to use it more. And that's my only sort of thing that I want to do with that car, is use it a bit more next year. Get it out to a few more shows, do a few more drives, and maybe do a couple of road trips in there. So I've already mentioned this car a couple of times. Obviously, my R107 380 SL. Now, that's a car I bought just over a year or so ago. It has spent quite a bit of time away from me having engine work done. It's probably my least sensible purchase. It doesn't make sense, that car. However, it is a car that I absolutely love and adore, even for the limited time I've spent in it, considering how much money I've spent on it. But that is a dream car for me. I've always loved those 80s Mercs. We'll come on to another couple of cars that I quite like. But the SL is such a fantastic car. I love it. Every time I drive it, people look at you. And yeah, it's just, every time you drive, it's a special car. I feel so special driving that car. So, like the SLK, next year I want to use that car a lot more. I haven't really used it much this year. So I went off to the SL shop, came back, used it a bit, did a couple more issues. They went back to the SL shop. Time I got it back, I think it was like August. So I haven't really had much chance to use it really. I've been out a few times, done some driving, done a couple of little meets in it, but it hasn't really done much, that car. So that needs to be out a little bit more next year. So finally, car that I bought this year and sold very quickly afterwards, I think I only had it for about a month, was the Mini R50 Cooper. Now, again, I really like this car. I bought it for, I think it was 350 plus the commission, it was £446, hence why I called it Project 446. Really liked that car. However, it was never going to be a car that I kept long term. And when a friend of mine sort of was looking for a project car and said to me, "I love your Mini," I sort of put two and two together, and I thought, well, should I sell the car now before I actually get into involved in the project? So I decided, I gave him a fair price for the car, fair for him, fair for me. And he came down, looked at it the next day, and yeah, I drove it up and delivered it to him a couple of nights later, and that was that really. So he's done a bit of work to the car, and he has invited me to come back up eventually when he's finished doing some work to it and never drive it. So I think I'll take it up on that offer, and I think there might be another video on the channel one day going back and revisiting the Mini. So what's my favourite car out of all of them? Probably the SL, because that's a dream car. I love the SLK, the R170 SLK that I've got. But that was not necessarily a dream car. It was a car that came my way, and I couldn't say no. It was too good opportunity and too cheap, really, to not to buy it, basically. And that sort of worked its way into my affections quite a lot, in particular last year. However, the SL was always a dream car for me. It was always a car that I would love to own one day. And there are a couple of other cars. I think one other car, in fact, that falls in that category, which we'll come on to in a minute. So, what's a car that I've owned that's most surprised me? That's got to be the R170 SLK, because I didn't really want to buy that car, as I've just mentioned. Never a dream car of mine. However, I'm so glad that I have bought it, and I'm so glad that it's there. I can use it and I enjoy it, and it hasn't cost me too much for the amount of enjoyment that I get out of that car. It's really good value for money. Are there any cars I regret selling? No. I think all the cars that I've sold have sort of won their course with me. I sort of think, yeah, I'm sort of can't see how this car fits into my life anymore. Suppose the one that would come close to that is my SLK, my new SLK. I don't really regret it though. I think it was quite a tough choice, but I had to take a bit of a call on it, and I don't regret selling it. That's probably the one car that I sort of think, should I have kept? Shouldn't I have kept it? Even now, I think should I have sold it? But when I put my sensible head on, it's yeah, I don't regret it to be honest. Are there any cars that I dream about? Obviously, my R107 SL is my dream car. I absolutely love that car. The only other car, and this would be my perfect sort of companion for that car, would be an AMG GT. There's something totally and utterly different to that car. They really are chalk and cheese. I absolutely love those cars. I've done a Mercedes World Experience in one, and that's where I was sort of convinced that I've got to have one of these one day. One day, I still think they're a little bit too pricey. But there is a point where they're going to come down. Sort of even the cheap ones now are sort of touching, if we don't mind, a high mileage on 40 grand. Still a lot of money. But if they keep coming down, there's going to be that point where I might jump on one of them, to be honest. So, but that's probably not going to be for a good few years yet, anyway. The only other car I would quite like is a C126 SEC. I really like them. The big sort of 80s S-Class coupe. The only thing that would stop me from buying is I already have the SL. I just feel like it'd be too similar. I think the AMG GT is something totally different to the SL, so I can sort of see a reason for having that car. Whereas I just feel that the SEC and the SL would sort of blend too much into one another. They're very sort of similar cars. Are there any other cars I'd like to own? I think there are a few cars. I've already mentioned about the Mini. I had the R50 Cooper. However, I would really like to now own an R53 Cooper S, just as a bit of a comparison. So that might eventually be on the cards one day. Something like a Mark 1 TT, even though people tell me how unreliable they are, sort of that's on the radar for me. Possibly a R171 SLK. I've sort of toyed with the idea of one of these. They are quite temptingly cheap at the moment. Particularly, I think my dream spec would be like a 350 manual, so the 3.5 V6 with the manual gearbox. I think that's possibly one that I would consider. I've also developed a bit of a liking for Porsche. I don't quite know why. Maybe it's just because of the other very famous brand from Stuttgart. And I did quite enjoy my trip to the Porsche Museum recently as well. So I would sort of like to own one of those eventually one day. I think the only other car, which is a bit of an oddball car, is an Alpine A110, the little sort of two-seat sports car that Alpine do. Alpine, which I'm way pronouncing Alpine, isn't it? I would quite like one of them eventually. So I feel like I've probably given too much of an answer to that question about what cars I've previously owned, but hopefully it gives you a bit more insight to what cars I've owned in the past, what cars I would like to own in the future, what are my other dream cars. So hopefully you've taken a little bit away from there. I'd love to hear in the comments again if there are interesting cars you've owned, if you own any similar cars to what I've owned, also what your dream cars are as well. What would be your car you would really love to own one day? So drop that into the comments below. As ever, like, comment, subscribe, all good stuff. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.